to begin, I'd like just to take a few minutes, 5, maybe 10 minutes, of burning questions from the audience for any of our panel members. And or if you would wish to name any of the cross-cutting themes that you thought you heard from this range of perspectives across different regions about how these different regions are addressing the sustainability question. What commonalities are you hearing? What common challenges? What unique differences? Questions as well as themes. I want to open it up just for a moment. There are running mics, 3 people in the audience. If you could please just cover the hands as they go up. Questions, have one here first. Thank you, sir. And you can direct your question to the audience, and as you speak, could you please announce yourself, who you are, and your organization?
Good afternoon. My name's David Goodfellow. I'm an Australian beef producer. One issue that was only touched on lightly today was who owns the farm. We just learned from Bill that I think 65% of family ranches in the US might be passed from this generation to the next. That seems like quite a low number. I was wondering perhaps if we could hear from Brazil and Argentina, where we've heard probably some of the greatest opportunities for productivity growth in the beef industry over the next 10 years, as to whether there's a change in land ownership there, and if there is, who's the new owner of land, and whether that might actually accelerate productivity growth.
Terrific. And I think, what if we get just 2 or 3 questions and take out one more on top of that?
Okay. Hi, I'm Anna Jamieson. I'm from WWF Sweden, and I would like to ask Steve Homer, if we saw some slides earlier that the population growth in Africa is going to be rapid, and then you say there's a big opportunity for producing more beef, but is it really sustainable to send it to Europe as an export commodity instead of feeding the people in Africa? Thank you.
Great. So second question to Steve around sustainability of export for Africa. Let's add one more.
Hello, my name is Tony Gleeson. I manage a land management certification scheme in Australia. And the thing that I'd like to put before the panel and the floor is the seeming conflict between beef productivity criteria and environmental criteria against the background of needing to increase food production.
Great. Thank you, sir. Beef productivity criteria versus environmental criteria. How well do those match up, and help us understand the pathway forward? So let me turn to Brazil first, if that's all right. The question is, land ownership trends, ownership and passage of farmland from one family to the next across generations. What's the story in Brazil?
Well, if we look at Brazilian history, we actually it's very different on the different regions of Brazil. Brazilian agriculture started with coffee and sugarcane with the Portuguese people in the 16th century, and there are some families that owns farms for hundreds of years, but it's a very small number. And especially in the last 50 years, when people were pushed to go to the frontier in Brazil, there's a lot of small farmers in the south of Brazil and people that had no land at all that migrated to the west and to the north of Brazil. As I said, they were stimulated by Brazilian government to do so, and they are actually pioneers on the frontier land. So it's actually very new. If you look to the west and north of Brazil, property, these people have been there for 30 years, 50 years maybe. And if you look to the south of Brazil, there's people there living, working on farms since 100 years or so. So we have this regional variation. And the problem is that these people that moved to the west and to the north of Brazil, especially in the north, in the Amazon region, was done it in a very, how do I say, confused way. There was, still today, there's a lot of problems with property titles there. There's a lot of land that's not, doesn't have, the owner is there, he's living there for 30 years, but he still doesn't have the papers about that land. So that's one of the key points we are working on with Brazilian government to get, because that's the basis if you want to discuss sustainability, is to know first who is the owner of that land. And that's one of the key points we are discussing now in Brazil.
Terrific. Ricardo, would you like to add anything?
No, it's okay.
You're okay? Terrific. Okay. Let's move to the second question to Steve in terms of the African perspective. The question came from WWF regarding the sustainability of exporting to Europe when there are needs in country regarding nutrition, food, and the like.
Okay. I think this touches on some of the points that Jason made very early in the day, actually about the affordability of food, the cost of food locally. Certainly our experience is that by exporting perhaps 2 cows, we're talking about farmers here with probably 5, 6 animals themselves. If they can export 2 cows, the net income increase for that small family farm is so huge that it makes such a big difference. And that net income will go for buying corn. The price of corn has gone through the roof, as everybody's aware. And it'll actually help feed the family far better if they can sell 2 cows to export than if they can sell 2 cows to their neighbour. It also goes into things like medicines and education. Certainly education of the kids will lead to a better developed country further down the line. We often look to the kids rather than to the current generation in Africa to take themselves out of poverty. Again, just looking at some of the numbers that I threw up earlier, 250,000 head a year going to slaughter in Namibia and Botswana out of an African population of 220 million cattle. If we up that by 10-fold, the increase in income and wealth generation, poverty alleviation is going to be absolutely huge. The impact on consumers in Europe and the impact on the climate is going to be really, really tiny. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a perception problem that all of Africa is starving and thirsty, but I would encourage you all to look at the 57 countries completely separately and realize that they have a diversity of climate and of needs.